Caleb, sign the divorce papers. Vera Wong, his mother-in-law, slid the document across the table toward him. Caleb Chui, 24 years old, was a technician at the Agricultural Technology Station in Rainbow Town, Yinhu County. His wife, Eleanor Lou, was the town's deputy mayor, in charge of commerce. Caleb stared, a dazed, dreamlike expression on his face. He didn't look at the papers. His eyes were fixed on the calendar on the desk. June 1 ST. That was right. He had returned from decades in the future to this very day, the darkest moment of his life, the one that had changed his fate forever. In his previous life, his mother-in-law had also come to the AG Tech station today, demanding he sign the divorce papers on Eleanor's behalf. After the initial shock, Caleb had gotten into a massive argument with Vera before racing off on his bicycle to the town government building. Desperate to know why his wife's heart had changed, he had kicked open her office door. He'd found her on the sofa with a young man, her face flushed, clearly flustered and emotional. That young man was Julian Zhao, the son of Yunhu County's magistrate, Gavin Zhao. The sight had sent all the blood rushing to Caleb's head. He'd grabbed a large fruit knife from the coffee table and plunged it into Julian's chest. After that, his mind went blank. When he finally came to his senses, he was in the custody of the county police department. If he hadn't been a direct descendant of the powerful Chui family from the capital, his fate would have been a single bullet. The Chui family managed to get him out, but they exiled him to the Great Northwest. There, he fell into alcoholism and wasted away for decades. Caleb, what are you spacing out for? Vera's impatient voice snapped him back to the present. The haze in Caleb's eyes cleared instantly. He looked up. Why does Eleanor want a divorce? Vera scoffed. You have the nerve to ask why? You were college sweethearts, and 2 years ago, you even gave up a life in the big city to settle in Rainbow Town for her. But now, through her own efforts, she's the deputy mayor in charge of investment. And you? Caleb remained silent. You're still just a lowly technician at the AG Tech station. Vera's tone was sharp and cruel. Caleb, you are no longer worthy of Eleanor. If she doesn't divorce you now, while she's still young, you'll just keep dragging her down. She'll be stuck as a deputy mayor for the rest of her life. Caleb's expression was calm. He simply nodded. This surprised Vera. She had expected him to scream and argue. But this was better. She continued. Most importantly, the old mayor is about to retire. For Eleanor to take his place, she needs more than just hard work. She needs connections in high places. As it happens, the county magistrate's only son, Julian Zhao, saw Eleanor and has been smitten with her ever since, despite her being married. Caleb cut her off. And Julian Zhao is in Eleanor's office right now, during the lunch break. You arranged that, didn't you? Vera froze, blurting out, how did you know? Caleb gave a dry, humorless laugh. He picked up the pen and swiftly signed his name on the divorce agreement. With a sharp snap, he tossed the pen aside. Without another glance at Vera, he strode out of the small conference room. It's good to be reborn, he murmured, looking up at the brilliant blue sky. He grabbed his bicycle from against the wall and rode out of the AG Tech station. The ride to the town government building took only 10 minutes. It was lunch break, so the compound was quiet. Eleanor's office was on the 3rd floor, at the far west end. This time, Caleb hadn't wasted 10 minutes arguing with Vera. He was arriving several minutes earlier than in his past life. His soon-to-be ex-wife's face probably hadn't even had time to turn red yet. He walked briskly up the stairs and, reaching Eleanor's office, pushed the door open without knocking. On the sofa in the reception area, Julian Zhao was looking at Eleanor with a deeply affectionate expression, murmuring something to her. Eleanor looked flustered, lifting a glass of water to her lips. The sudden opening of the door startled them both. They looked up quickly. When Eleanor saw Caleb, her face turned deathly pale. Julian, after a moment of shock, shot to his feet, pointing a finger at Caleb. Who let you in? Get out, he snarled. He knew perfectly well who Caleb was. He knew the woman he was relentlessly pursuing was Caleb's wife. So what? Even caught in the act, Julian felt bold enough to order Caleb out. Caleb ignored him. His gaze fell on the coffee table. There was a watermelon on it. And next to the watermelon, a fruit knife? The very same knife that, in his past life, had become a murder weapon. But this life, Caleb would not touch that knife. To kill a man over a woman who only cared about climbing the social ladder, destroying his own life in the process. It was so damn stupid. Caleb's gaze shifted to Eleanor, his eyes distant for a moment. Eleanor was stunning, in face and figure, and their life together had been passionate. Caleb, what are you doing here? Eleanor's eyes were filled with guilt, but she tried to feign composure. Caleb chuckled. Am I interrupting something? Eleanor's face flushed a deep crimson. Damn it, I told you to get out. Julian cursed, lunging forward with a clenched fist. Though Julian was tall and tried to look intimidating, his body was weak from a life of indulgence. As he lunged, his steps were unsteady. Caleb easily sidestepped him and, in one smooth motion, swung his own fist, connecting squarely with Julian's jaw. Julian grunted and crumpled to the floor. Before he could react, Caleb stepped forward and planted his foot firmly on Julian's neck. You son of a... Julian started to curse, but Caleb pressed down with his foot, and the word died in his throat. Let him go. He's the magistrate's son. Eleanor snapped out of her shock, hissing in a low voice. Whatever it is, we can talk about it at home. There's nothing to talk about. I already signed the divorce papers your mother brought. I'll see you at the Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow at 8 a.m. Caleb said coldly. He lifted his foot and kicked Julian hard in the face again. As Julian cried out in pain, Caleb turned and walked briskly out the door. He went down to the first-floor reception office. It was empty during the lunch break. Caleb picked up the receiver of the landline and dialed a number. Soon, a stern, authoritative voice answered. This is Sebastian Su. Who is speaking? Caleb replied. Uncle, it's me. Caleb. Caleb. Sebastian's voice softened immediately. Are you calling to ask when the investment from Future Group will arrive? Don't worry, it'll be soon. Once your wife secures that investment, the position of Rainbow Town's mayor is guaranteed for her. Uncle, Caleb said softly. I'm calling to tell you 3 things. Go on, Sebastian replied. First, suspend all investment from Future Group into Rainbow Town. Second, Eleanor and I are divorced. Caleb paused, then delivered the final blow. And third, please inform the Chui family that I intend to become the mayor of Rainbow Town. What? On the other end of the line, Sebastian Su's voice shot up. Caleb, you got divorced? He wasn't concerned about halting the investment, and he didn't even take Caleb's declaration about becoming mayor seriously. For the eldest grandson of the capital's Chui family, to become a small-town mayor in this day and age was laughably easy. Yes, Eleanor and I are divorced, Caleb repeated, a wave of emotion washing over him. Back when he started college, the Chui family had already arranged a perfect, high-society marriage for him. They were just waiting for him to graduate. But in college, Caleb fell in love with Eleanor Lou. He swore he would marry no one else. His grandfather, the head of the Chui family, was furious, but it was no use. So, the old man played his final card. You can marry her, but if you do, forget about ever having a career in public service. Full of youthful idealism, Caleb agreed without a second thought, and so, he had followed Eleanor to Rainbow Town. Although his grandfather was disappointed in him and forbade anyone in the family from helping, a mother's love knows no bounds. Caleb's mother, Linda Su, couldn't help her son directly, but she could help her daughter-in-law. Linda believed that if Eleanor succeeded in her career, it would indirectly help Caleb and, more importantly, her future grandchildren. It was through Linda's secret maneuvering that Eleanor had become the deputy mayor in just 2 years. Linda was even planning, at Caleb's request, to have Eleanor bring in another major investment just as the old mayor retired, securing her promotion to the top spot. But right at this critical juncture, Eleanor, spurred on by her mother, had decided to hitch her wagon to a more powerful man. Good, good, good. Sebastian's excitement finally calmed. Caleb, suspending the investment and you becoming mayor are both easy to handle. But if you want to reconnect with Ms. Shaw, that might be difficult now. Ms. Shaw was the fiancée the Chui family had chosen for him. A fleeting image of her flashed through Caleb's mind. He gave a wry smile. Uncle, I have no illusions about that. It's fine. After I finalize the divorce with Eleanor tomorrow, I'll come to the city to see you. After ending the call, Caleb stepped out of the reception office. Hurried footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Julian Zhao, a trickle of blood at the corner of his mouth, was rushing down. If Caleb hadn't shown up, Julian would have succeeded in his plan to corner the beautiful deputy mayor in her office. He had secretly slipped a special drug into her water, and she had been just about to drink it when Caleb burst in. Caleb Chui, you dare to hit me. You just wait. Julian hissed, his eyes venomous as he passed Caleb. He then hurried out the door. Idiot. You're a dead man, Caleb thought with a silent, cold smile. Just then, he heard the sharp, hurried click of heels on the stairs. It was Eleanor. She stopped short when she saw him. Oh right, I needed to see you, Caleb said, his tone flat. Let's go. We'll talk at home. He needed to pack his things and move out. After Eleanor became deputy mayor, she had been assigned a small house in the town's residential compound for officials. Now that they were divorcing, Caleb certainly wouldn't be living with her anymore. Eleanor didn't speak, just walked quickly down the stairs and led the way out. The house was a simple, single-story brick building with a small yard. The easternmost room was the bedroom, the middle was the living room, and the western room was for storage. It wasn't large, but it was clean and cozy. I'm only taking my personal belongings. The money and valuables are all yours, Caleb told Eleanor as he went inside to pack. The divorce agreement specifically stated that Caleb could take all their savings. Vera had been against this, but Eleanor had insisted. She felt she was the one who had wronged Caleb for the sake of her career, so she should be the one to leave with nothing. But the house belonged to the town, provided for the deputy mayor, so she couldn't give it to him. Caleb didn't care about the money. He just packed his clothes and books. Standing in the doorway, watching the man who had always been so warm and caring, the man who made her feel safe at night, Eleanor felt a pang of confusion. She truly loved this man, but he had no ambition. While she was soaring, On the verge of becoming a town mayor at just 24, Caleb, despite his prestigious university degree, was content to be a technician, just coasting through life. The disappointment had grown, fueled by her family's daily nagging. She had let her judgment be clouded, slowly coming to believe that Caleb was no longer good enough for her. But now that he had actually agreed to the divorce, she felt like something precious inside her had shattered. Suddenly, she had a desperate urge to save their marriage. The roar of a motorcycle engine sounded from outside. Eleanor turned to see her brother, Gary Lou, pulling up on a small motorcycle with their mother, Vera, riding behind him. "Sis, did that loser agree to the divorce?" "That's fantastic," Gary shouted excitedly before he even got inside. Vera was also beaming. Eleanor frowned and scolded him in a low voice. "What are you yelling about?" Right, Vera chimed in. "Even though your sister's divorce is a good thing, it's still best to be discreet." "What's there to be discreet about?" Gary said dismissively. "My sister's about to become the mayor. Who would dare gossip unless they don't want to live in Rainbow Town anymore?" "True, but it never hurts to be low-key," Vera said, noticing her daughter's somber mood. She quickly changed the subject. "Gary, go check on Caleb. Make sure he doesn't run off with anything valuable." Right. Gary rushed into the house and snatched the canvas bag from Caleb's hand. Caleb frowned. "What are you doing?" "What am I doing?" Gary sneered, unzipping the bag. "Making sure you're not stealing my sister's valuables." Eleanor's face hardened. "Gary, give the bag back to your brother-in-law." "He's not my brother-in-law anymore. Not since he signed those papers," Gary retorted. He started pulling things out of the bag and tossing them carelessly onto the floor. With a sharp crack, a small glass photo frame that had been wrapped in clothes hit the floor and shattered. It was a picture of Caleb with his mother, taken before he came to Rainbow Town. His mother had worried so much about him these past 2 years, and he cherished that photo. But now, Gary had shattered it. Caleb's anger erupted. He lifted his foot and stomped it hard into Gary's stomach. "Ah!" Gary cried out, falling back onto the sofa. Seeing Caleb attack her brother, Eleanor gasped. "Caleb, what are you doing?" Vera lunged forward, claws out. "You useless piece of trash, you dare hit my son? I'll kill you." A loud slap echoed through the room. Caleb's sharp response stunned his former mother-in-law into silence. The entire Lou family, mother, son, and daughter, stared, frozen. In their memory, the scholarly Caleb was always mild-tempered. But now, "Say another word, and I'll hit you too," Caleb said, his gaze shifting to Eleanor, his voice ice-cold. He bent down and picked up the broken frame with his mother's picture. The landline on the desk began to ring. Gary, still on the sofa, instinctively pressed the speakerphone button. "This is Gary Lou. Who's this?" "It's Julian Zhao." A voice came through the speaker. "Is your sister there? Tell her something. My dad just told me her position as mayor is basically secured. However what?" Julian didn't say. He was deliberately dangling the hook. Julian was deliberately baiting Gary, and Gary understood immediately. "However what?" he asked eagerly. "2 things, Julian said slowly. "First, as soon as she becomes mayor, she marries me. Second, I want her to start cracking down on Caleb Chui right now. That damn technician from the AG Tech station had the audacity to hit me." "No problem." Gary eagerly agreed on Eleanor's behalf, his voice dripping with flattery. "Brother-in-law, don't you worry. My sister will make sure that loser is dealt with so thoroughly he'll pack his bags and get out of Rainbow Town himself. But please, you have to put in a good word with your father for us. We can't let this opportunity slip away." "Haha. Of course, no problem," Julian replied, pleased that Gary was already calling him brother-in-law. "I'm with Secretary Zhang right now. He'll help your sister take care of that idiot." Secretary Zhang was Marcus Zhang, the party secretary of Rainbow Town. His old mentor was none other than Julian's father. Standing there, Eleanor finally snapped out of her daze. Hearing her brother call Julian brother-in-law right in front of Caleb, and hearing the blatant plan to collude with Secretary Zhang to crush him, she was overcome with shame and anger. Just as she was about to lash out at Gary, Caleb, who had finished repacking his bag, walked past her without a word and out the door. "Good riddance," Vera spat on the floor. She turned to her daughter. "Eleanor, you need to think carefully. Figure out a way to get that loser kicked out of the civil service entirely. Better yet, get him thrown in prison." "Right," said Gary, finishing his call with Julian. "I can arrange for the widow from the east end of the village too. You know, sleep with him. Then we can." "Shut up." Eleanor stomped her foot, pointing at the door and screaming at her brother. Get out of my house right now." Caleb, of course, didn't know what the Lou family was plotting. He slung his bag over his shoulder, walked out of the residential compound, got on his bicycle, and rode back to the AG Tech station. He needed to be alone, to quietly plan his future. He could easily transfer out of Rainbow Town, go back to the capital, or work anywhere else. But he chose to stay. He had developed an affection for the town and saw the poverty of its people. With his knowledge from decades in the future, he wanted to do something real for its 60,000 residents. And there was another reason. He had to settle the score with Julian Zhao, the magistrate's son who had stolen his wife. As for making Eleanor regret her decision by revealing his powerful background, Caleb had no interest in that right now. The AG Tech Station had dorm rooms, though no one ever used them. This meant Caleb didn't have to worry about being homeless. He found the station chief, Director Lou, and said that with the upcoming wheat harvest, farmers would be coming in to repair their machinery. He volunteered to stay at the station to be available to help them anytime. Director Lou, still unaware that Caleb had just lost everything in his divorce, readily agreed, praising him for his high level of dedication. Just what I'd expect from Deputy Mayor Lou's husband, he'd said. Caleb just gave a bitter smile and began to clean out his new room. The next morning, at 9 o'clock in the county seat, Caleb walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, a divorce certificate in his hand. He stood on the steps, watching the traffic and taking a deep, satisfying breath. A voice came from behind him. Caleb, what are your plans now? It was Eleanor. Caleb turned. Today, she was wearing a white blouse, a black skirt, and a pair of black high-heeled sandals that perfectly accentuated her figure. The aura of a young, sophisticated woman she exuded was undeniably alluring. Before Caleb could say anything, Eleanor walked towards a car. Come on, let's find a place to talk. We're strangers now. What is there to talk about? Caleb scoffed, but he was curious to hear what she had to say. He followed her. As a deputy mayor in charge of commerce, Eleanor was entitled to a car. She had learned to drive with Caleb back in college, and she was a good driver. Caleb thought she might take him to a quiet spot by the river or a secluded grove to talk. Instead, she drove him to a small, cheap motel on the east side of town. The moment the door to the room, rented for 5 yuan an hour, closed behind them, Eleanor got straight to the point. Caleb, you need to use your connections and get a transfer out of Yunhu County. Now. Otherwise, she continued, Julian will never let you go. What's this? Are you concerned about me? Caleb leaned against the wall and took out a cigarette. I'm not leaving. I'm curious to see how your new lover plans to deal with me. You? Eleanor bit her lip hard. In Yunhu County, you'll have Julian against you. And back in Rainbow Town, Secretary Zhang will make your life impossible. If you stay here, it will end badly for you. Funny you should say that, Caleb said, looking her up and down with a smirk. I've developed a taste for rotten fruit. If I didn't, why would I have come to Rainbow Town 2 years ago? Rotten fruit. He was calling her a worthless woman. Eleanor was intelligent enough to understand the insult, but she didn't get angry. She just lowered her head. Caleb, I'm sorry. Deputy Mayor Lou, you're being too polite. Are we done here? If so, I'm leaving. Caleb started for the door, but Eleanor blocked his way. Is there something else? Caleb asked coldly, frowning at her. Before you go, Eleanor said, her voice trembling as she glanced at the bed. Let's. One last time. You can do whatever you want to me. Take out all your anger. Is this some kind of divorce benefit? Caleb laughed again, his face a mask of mockery. Deputy Mayor Lou, do you really think I'm that desperate for rotten fruit? Caleb, I'm not dirty yet. Eleanor suddenly lifted her head, threw her arms around him, stood on her toes, and tried to kiss him. But Caleb pushed her away forcefully. As Eleanor stumbled back, Caleb opened the door and walked out. He knew she wasn't dirty, yet, in that sense. He also knew she must have spent the whole night awake, ultimately choosing power over him. She had tasted authority and developed an ambition for it. He truly had no desire for a woman like that. After leaving the motel, Caleb went directly to the city. He had already planned to see his uncle, Sebastian, and now that things with Eleanor had turned ugly, he needed to be prepared. He didn't return to Rainbow Town that night. Early the next morning, Caleb returned quietly in a small car. As he was eating breakfast at his usual spot, he could feel the strange looks from people who knew him. The employees from the various town departments no longer treated him with special respect as Deputy Mayor Lou's husband. Clearly, the news of their divorce was out. Caleb didn't care. But as soon as he got back to the AG Tech Station, he was summoned to the director's office. Inside, besides Director Lou and his deputy, Old Yang, were 2 police officers. The moment he entered, the officers blocked the doorway. Director Lou, who had always been so friendly, now looked stern. Before Caleb could speak, the director's voice boomed. Comrade Caleb Chui, did you, or did you not, break into the finance office last night and steal the 10,000 yuan from the safe? That morning, Director Lou had arrived at work unusually early, only to find that the AG Tech Station's finance office had been burglarized. 10,000 yuan was missing from the iron safe. In an era when a worker's monthly salary was only 200 or 300 yuan, 10,000 was an enormous sum of money. Stunned, Director Lou immediately called the police. The local police station responded quickly, sending 2 officers to investigate. There were only 2 people at the AG Tech Station the previous night, the gatekeeper, Old Zhang, and Caleb Chui, who was on duty. Old Zhang swore up and down that he hadn't gone into the station's 2-story building and hadn't seen anyone climb the wall. So who broke the lock and stole the money? Director Lou's suspicion immediately fell on Caleb. Julian certainly works fast, Caleb thought. He instantly understood what was happening. He tried to explain, insisting he hadn't even been in Rainbow Town the previous night. His explanation was useless. They were taking him in. The two officers twisted Caleb's arms behind his back and, in front of a crowd of onlookers, pushed him into a police van as if he were a dangerous criminal. The siren wailed as the van sped away from the AG Tech station. The theft was a major case for Rainbow Town. It not only alerted Secretary Zhang, but also prompted him to call an emergency meeting. As a deputy mayor, Eleanor Lou was, of course, required to attend. According to the police officers who carefully investigated the crime scene, the technician from the AG Tech station, Caleb Chui, is the prime suspect. Secretary Zhang announced, his face a mask of fury. He tapped his fingers on the table, his eyes sweeping over everyone present. Of course, until we have concrete evidence, we will not jump to conclusions. However, while we will not wrongly accuse an innocent man, we will absolutely not let a guilty one go free. His gaze finally settled on Eleanor's face. She had kept her head down since the meeting began, scribbling aimlessly in a notebook. Chief Dylan, Secretary Zhang turned to the head of the police station. His tone was severe. As the party secretary of Rainbow Town, I am ordering you to solve this case within 3 days. You must eliminate the negative impact of this crime and restore a sense of security for our people. Are you confident you can do that? Yes, sir. Chief Dylan shot to his feet, his voice loud and clear. I guarantee we will solve this case in 3 days. How could he be so sure? Because of certain, persuasive methods that weren't exactly by the book. A bookish type like Caleb Chui would be lucky to hold out for a single day. No one at that meeting was a fool. Hearing that Caleb had been arrested as the prime suspect in a theft the day after he and Deputy Mayor Lou divorced, everyone quickly sensed the political maneuvering at play. I heard the magistrate's son has taken an interest in her, which is why she divorced Caleb so suddenly. Someone thought, glancing at Eleanor. If all goes as planned, she'll be the next mayor. Abandoning her husband for her career is one thing, but setting him up to be destroyed like this, that's just cruel. She looks so beautiful, but her heart is as venomous as a snake. Many in the room looked at Eleanor and shook their heads secretly. They made a mental note to be extra careful around her in the future. A woman who would ruin her own husband for ambition wouldn't hesitate to do the same to anyone else. Though her head was down, Eleanor could feel the stares, like invisible needles pricking her skin. All right, meeting adjourned, Secretary Zhang said with a wave of his hand. His old mentor's son, Julian Zhao, was waiting for him in his office. Secretary Zhang. Just as he was about to stand, Eleanor, who had been lost in thought, suddenly looked up. I can prove that, Caleb. What could she prove about Caleb? Before she could finish, the door to the conference room was suddenly pushed open. It was Director Yan from the town government office. For him to burst in without knocking during a high-level meeting was a serious breach of protocol. Secretary Zhang's face darkened. But before he could reprimand him, Director Yan blurted out, Secretary Zhang, Mr. Lou from the Jinxing Electronics factory is here. He says he's moving the entire factory out of Rainbow Town. What? Secretary Zhang froze. Even the old mayor, who was on the verge of retirement and stayed out of everything, looked up in disbelief. Eleanor was even more shocked. Jinxing Electronics was a company she had personally brought to Rainbow Town just last year. It was a $1 million yuan investment that had created over 100 jobs. For a poor town in those days, that was a massive achievement. And now, Jinxing Electronics was suddenly leaving. How could everyone in the room not be stunned? Forgetting everything else, Eleanor shot to her feet. Why is Mr. Lou pulling out his investment? Director Yin just shook his head. Where is Mr. Lou? Take me to him, Eleanor said. Before her words had even faded, a young assistant, Li, appeared at the door. Deputy Mayor Lou, bad news. Mr. He from the Cayenne Toy Factory is here to see you too. He says he's also pulling out his investment. The Cayenne Toy Factory was another company Eleanor had recruited last year, with a similar scale of investment and job creation as Jinxing Electronics. And now they were leaving too? What was happening? The entire conference room was in a state of shock. The landline on the table suddenly rang. The director of the town's party and government office, Director Wang, picked it up. Rainbow Town Party Office, Director Wang speaking. A man's voice came clearly through the receiver. Director Wang, hello? This is Vincent Zhang, General Manager of the Qingshan branch of Future Group. I am formally notifying Rainbow Town, on behalf of the Hong Kong-based Future Group, that we are immediately terminating all investment intentions between our two parties. The director's eyes widened in horror. If the sudden departure of Jinxing Electronics and Cayenne Toys was a heavy blow to Rainbow Town's economy, then the cancellation of the Future Group project, another one spearheaded by Eleanor with a planned initial investment of 10 million yuan, was a catastrophic, knockout punch. Before he could ask any questions, the line went dead. Director Wang quickly relayed the devastating news to Secretary Zhang. Zhang felt the world go dark around him. The failure of the Future Group investment was a direct blow to him personally. The county magistrate, Gavin Zhao, had confidently told him that if Rainbow Town successfully landed Future Group, not only would Eleanor leapfrog her way to the mayor's office, but it would also help Secretary Zhang secure a long-coveted seat on the Yunhu County Standing Committee. But now, he looked over at Eleanor. The news hit her like a thunderclap. She swayed on her feet, grabbing the table for support. Deputy Mayor Lou, it's terrible. Another frantic voice came from the doorway. Mr. Tian from the Tianshan Dairy is here. He says he needs to speak with you immediately about withdrawing his investment. Within half an hour, the owners of more than a dozen companies Eleanor had brought in over the past 2 years had all gathered at the Rainbow Town government building, demanding to discuss the withdrawal of their investments. They were willing to pull out, even if it meant taking a significant financial loss from breaking their contracts. When asked why, they offered no reason. They were simply leaving. This mass exodus, coupled with the sudden termination of the Future Group project, a deal that could make or break Eleanor and Secretary Zhang's careers, threw the entire town leadership into a panic. It felt like the sky was falling. When so many businesses pull out at once, it was bound to attract the attention of Yunhu County and even the entire city of Qingshan. Any person with a shred of intelligence would conclude that the leadership of Rainbow Town must have made a colossal, unforgivable mistake. Forget about promotions. Secretary Zhang and the others would be lucky to solve this crisis and keep their current jobs. They no longer had the time or energy to worry about a petty theft at the AG Tech station. Get all the business owners into the auditorium immediately, Secretary Zhang ordered, his voice trembling, to Director Yin. Yin turned and ran. The chaos in the government compound caught the attention of Julian Zhao, who had been waiting alone in the secretary's office. He stepped out and grabbed a random employee to ask what was going on. All the company's Deputy Mayor Lou brought in over the last 2 years are suddenly pulling out, the employee said hastily before hurrying off. All of them. Pulling out. Julian was baffled. But he wasn't a complete idiot. He quickly realized this was a major crisis for Rainbow Town, one that could potentially drag down his own father. If the economy of one of the county's 12 towns suddenly collapsed, his father, the county magistrate, would surely be held responsible. Forgetting all about Caleb, Julian rushed back to the office, picked up the phone, and called his dad. What? Gavin Zhao was shocked by his son's report. Are you telling the truth? Yes, Julian said, nodding vigorously. I saw it myself. The whole compound is in chaos. Secretary Zhang and the others looked terrified. All right, I understand. Gavin didn't have time for more questions. He had to get to Rainbow Town immediately to see what was happening. Since he couldn't help with this mess, Julian decided to wander out of the government building and head to the police station to visit Caleb. By chance, he ran into his future brother-in-law, Gary Lou, at the gate. The two exchanged a knowing smile. Come on, Julian said. Let's go see Caleb together. Just as Julian Zhao and Gary Lou left, a small pickup truck drove up to the gate, its occupants beating gongs and drums. Who's this now? Beating gongs and drums. I hope it's good news, muttered Director Yin, already a bundle of nerves. He hurried over to see what was going on. Several people jumped out of the truck. One of them held a rolled-up red scroll. With a flick of his wrists, he unfurled it. It was a large, bright red silk banner. Seeing the festive banner, Secretary Zhang and the others, who were leading the business owners to the auditorium, felt a wave of relief. Finally, a piece of good news. But when Secretary Zhang and the others read the words written on the banner, their expressions became a mixture of confusion and astonishment. With sincere gratitude to Comrade Caleb Chui of Rainbow Town for his heroic, life-saving actions, Director Yin rushed to the man holding the banner and asked what this was all about. Hello, comrade. It's like this, said a middle-aged man, gripping Yan's hands. His name was David Zhao, a workshop supervisor from the Qingshan Machinery Factory in the provincial capital. Just yesterday evening, David Zhao's young daughter, a third grader, had been playing by the river after school and had accidentally fallen in. It was flood season, and the river was deep and fast. Although there were many people around, no one dared to jump in. Just as the child was about to be swept away and drown, someone suddenly dove into the water. The man who saved the little girl was Caleb Chui of Rainbow Town. Caleb Chui not only rescued the child, but also took her to the hospital. When David Zhao heard what had happened, he rushed to the hospital and thanked Caleb profusely. Once David Zhao's daughter was out of danger, David Zhao invited Caleb Chui to his home for a celebratory dinner, offering him 1,000 yuan as a reward. But Caleb Chui refused to take it. Seeing that Caleb Chui was sincere, David Zhao's admiration for him grew. The only way he could express his gratitude was by toasting him repeatedly. They drank late into the night, until Caleb Chui was too drunk to leave and stayed over at David's house. It was only this morning that David Zhao had borrowed a car from his factory to drive Caleb Chui back to Rainbow Town. The gratitude for saving a life is a debt one can never repay. Since Caleb Chui refused any reward, David Zhao felt he had to do something. So, David Zhao had this banner made and came, with gongs and drums, to deliver it personally. After David Zhao finished his story, Secretary Zhang and Chief Dylan stared at each other in stunned silence. The old mayor and the other officials exchanged rapid, meaningful glances. The 10,000 yuan from the AG Tech station had been stolen late last night. But Caleb Chui had been in the provincial capital with David Zhao and his family all night. Caleb Chui had a perfect alibi. He had no means, motive, or opportunity. Damn it, what kind of good news is this? Secretary Zhang cursed under his breath. Eleanor, however, quietly breathed a sigh of relief, though her brow immediately furrowed again at the thought of all the departing investors. David Zhao, having told his story, now asked where he could find comrade Caleb Chui. Yes, where was Caleb Chui now? Caleb Chui was locked in a cell at the police station. For now, Caleb Chui was only a suspect with no direct evidence against him, so he wasn't in handcuffs. Caleb Chui was sitting on an iron chair, lost in thought, when the cell door opened. Caleb Chui looked up to see Julian Zhao and Gary Lou at the entrance. Julian Zhao told Gary Lou to wait outside. Julian Zhao stepped in and closed the door behind him. Well, Caleb Chui, I guess you've learned your lesson now. Julian Zhao sneered, looking down at him. I think you probably understand what's going on. Caleb Chui nodded. You framed me. Correct answer. I'm the one who set you up. Gary Lou and I split the 10,000 yuan from the station. But you're the one who's going to take the fall for it. Julian Zhao's face was alight with smug satisfaction. He leaned in closer. You bastard. You, a worthless technician, dared to hit me. Let me tell you the truth. Not only am I going to take your wife, I'm going to make sure you rot in prison. That's the only way Eleanor will be completely done with you. And it's the only way I won't have to worry about you coming after me. Caleb Chui looked at Julian Zhao as if he were an idiot, but said nothing. Caleb Chui's calm demeanor robbed Julian Zhao of any sense of victory. Julian Zhao decided to add a little more spice. You fool. You just sit tight in your cell. I'll take good care of Eleanor for you. TSK. Just thinking about her face, that smooth skin. Haha. I can't wait to throw her long legs over my shoulders and just... Julian Zhao's voice trailed off into a lewd suggestion. Caleb Chui suddenly shot up from his chair. His fist flew, striking Julian Zhao squarely in the face. Caleb Chui and Eleanor were divorced. Whatever she did now, whoever she was with, it had nothing to do with Caleb Chui. And yet, when Julian Zhao deliberately tried to provoke Caleb Chui by insulting Eleanor, Caleb Chui still hit him. It wasn't a pained, reflexive reaction. It was simply that Julian Zhao, in that moment, looked so profoundly pathetic. As Julian Zhao cried out, Caleb Chui grabbed a fistful of his hair, slammed his head down, and brought his right knee up with lightning speed. A sickening thud silenced Julian Zhao's scream. Julian Zhao clutched his stomach, dropping heavily to his knees in front of Caleb Chui. What's going on? Gary Lou, standing guard at the door, heard the commotion and burst in. Seeing Julian Zhao kneeling before Caleb Chui, his face contorted in pain, Gary Lou froze for a second before turning and yelling, "Help! Caleb Chui is attacking someone." After being kicked by Caleb Chui at Eleanor's house, Gary Lou had developed a strange fear of his former brother-in-law. Who dares to cause trouble in a police station? Several officers rushed over. Cuff him, Julian Zhao roared, forcing the words out through the searing pain in his stomach. Julian Zhao pointed a trembling finger at Caleb Chui. Today, if I don't cripple him, then I'm not the son of the Yunhu County Magistrate. The son of the Yunhu County Magistrate. If not for that title, the officers on duty would never have allowed Julian Zhao and Gary Lou to have a private visit with Caleb Chui in the first place. But the officers never imagined Caleb Chui would dare to attack the magistrate's son inside the station. This was outrageous. An officer named Mark Zhang immediately unhooked his handcuffs and moved towards Caleb Chui. What do you think you're doing? A loud voice barked. Caleb Chui looked up to see a rugged-looking man with a stubbled jaw striding towards them. It was Carl Chun, the deputy chief of the Rainbow Town police station. Seeing Carl Chun, Mark Zhang instinctively curled his lip in disdain before reporting. Deputy Chief Chun. The primary suspect in the AG Tech Station theft, Caleb Chui, is assaulting someone in his cell. Normally, a subordinate would drop the deputy when addressing a superior. But Mark Zhang had put a deliberate emphasis on the word, a clear sign of Carl Chun's lack of influence in the station. And it was true. Despite being highly competent, Carl Chun had been consistently suppressed by Chief Dylan for years and held little real authority. Carl Chun's face darkened. Mark, the investigation isn't even over. How can you be so sure Caleb Chui is the one who robbed the station? And another thing, Caleb Chui is in custody and isn't supposed to have outside visitors. What are those two doing in his cell? Mark Zhang was speechless. He couldn't very well admit that he had personally allowed Julian Zhao to come and rough Caleb Chui up. Julian Zhao, however, scrambled to his feet, furious. You bastard, do you know who I am? Julian Zhao screamed at Carl Chun. I don't give a damn who you are. Carl Chun's eyes blazed. Even if your father was the emperor himself, if you say one more word to me, I'll slap you silly. Julian Zhao recoiled, genuinely frightened by Carl Chun's ferocious demeanor. Get the hell out of here, Carl Chun ordered, standing his ground. Carl Chun didn't care if Julian Zhao was the magistrate's son. Carl Chun followed the rules. If Julian Zhao pushed it, Carl Chun would absolutely make good on his threat. Let's go, brother-in-law. Gary Lou whispered, tugging on Julian Zhao's arm. Gary Lou knew what kind of man Carl Chen was. Humbled, Julian Zhao took the opportunity to save face. Julian Zhao shot one last venomous glare at Caleb Chui and scurried away. Don't you lot have anything better to do? Carl Chen snarled at Mark Zhang and the other officers. If you're so bored, go patrol the wheat fields and watch for fires. Though Carl Chen had little power, he was still the deputy chief. If he gave an order and the officers disobeyed, it would give him the perfect excuse to discipline them. The officers exchanged glances and dispersed. Power-abusing little parasite, Carl Chen muttered, spitting on the ground as he watched Julian Zhao retreat. Carl Chen turned to Caleb Chui, his expression softening into one of pity. Kid, I thought my life was rough, but it looks like you've got it even worse. Carl Chen pulled out a pack of cigarettes, tossed one to Caleb Chui, and started rambling. Lost your wife, and then framed by her new lover. And the worst part is, the guy has powerful connections, so you just have to take it. Kid, let me give you some advice. Whether you take it is up to you. The story of Eleanor leaving Caleb Chui for Julian Zhao, the magistrate's son, had already been spread around town as a point of pride by Vera and Gary Lou. Everyone knew. It was also simple for Carl Chen to see that Caleb Chui had been framed by Julian Zhao. If Carl Chen couldn't see something that obvious, he'd never have made deputy chief while being suppressed by Chief Dylan. Go on, Chief Chen, Caleb Chui said politely, lighting the cigarette. The person who creates a problem is the one you need to solve it, Carl Chen said in a low voice. You need to go beg Deputy Mayor Lou. Ask her, for the sake of your 2 years together, to help you get through this. You know, a bond formed is a bond that remains. If you can move her, Julian Zhao probably won't be able to target you, at least for now. After this blows over, you should go back to your hometown. If you stay in Yunhu County, you're finished. Of course, you can't see her right now, but I can try to find her tonight and plead your case. Caleb Chui could see that Carl Chen was genuinely trying to help him. Caleb Chui would remember this kindness. Thank you, Chief Chen, Caleb Chui said sincerely. But I won't beg that woman. And I won't leave Yunhu County. I won't leave Rainbow Town. You want to fight Julian Zhao? Carl Chen stared at Caleb Chui. Or are you still hung up on Deputy Mayor Lou? Kid, I'm not trying to rub salt in the wound, but you're an outsider who came here for love. On what grounds can you possibly fight Julian Zhao? And the most important thing is, when a woman's heart changes, the first thing she wants to do is destroy her ex-husband. That way, she doesn't have to face the guilt of seeing you again. Caleb Chui was surprised. Caleb Chui hadn't expected the rough-looking Carl Chen to have such a keen understanding of women. I'm not leaving. As for Julian Zhao, Caleb Chui gave a dry laugh. Just then, Caleb Chui saw Mark Zhang, the officer Carl Chen had dismissed earlier, walking back towards them. Deputy Chief Chen, Mark Zhang said, his face a mask of official business. A call just came from Chief Dylan. The investigation has cleared Caleb Chui of any involvement in the AG Tech Station theft. Mark Zhang turned to Caleb Chui. You're free to go. Carl Chen's face was a mask of astonishment. By his analysis, the framed Caleb shouldn't have been released without Eleanor Lou's intervention. Yet here he was. Caleb, on the other hand, wasn't surprised at all. After seeing his uncle in the city yesterday, he had anticipated that Julian would retaliate for the beating. He and his uncle had already made a contingency plan. The men Sebastian Su had sent to escort Caleb back to town hadn't left. They had stayed behind, quietly monitoring the situation. The moment Caleb was taken away by the police, they had reported back to Sebastian. In response, Sebastian had dispatched David Zhao to rush to Rainbow Town with the banner. With David's testimony providing a solid alibi, Chief Dylan had no choice but to release Caleb. Chief Chen, I'll be on my way, Caleb said, shaking Carl's hand. He took a moment to memorize Mark Zhang's face before walking out of the police station. By now, the leadership of Rainbow Town was in total chaos. The county magistrate, Gavin Zhao, had rushed over from the county seat with the head of the investment bureau in tow. Gavin was desperate to find out why these business owners were so determined to pull out, even at a great personal loss. He hoped that with his most sincere attitude, he could persuade them to change their minds. But why were they leaving? Sometimes, having no reason is a reason in itself. The business owners didn't care about the devastating economic impact their collective withdrawal would have on Rainbow Town and Yunhu County. And as for Gavin Zhao's emotional appeals and pleas to stay and talk things over, Mr. Lou of Jinxing Electronics and the others had no interest. They simply pressed the person in charge of investment, Eleanor Lou, to produce the original contracts so they could terminate them. Can someone please tell me what the hell is going on? After asking the business owners to wait in the auditorium, Gavin herded all of Rainbow Town's senior officials into a conference room. He slammed his hand on the table, his voice a low, furious roar. His loss of composure was understandable. Just minutes earlier, he had received a call from the mayor of Qingshan City himself. The mayor had expressed extreme displeasure, demanding to know why businesses were staging a mass exodus from Rainbow Town and ordering Gavin to resolve the situation at any cost. In the grand scheme of Qingshan City, these dozen or so businesses were small fry. If they were scattered across the city's various districts and counties, their departure wouldn't even be a blip on the radar. But they were all concentrated in Rainbow Town, a town that for years had been at the bottom of the economic ladder, a town that was finally showing signs of a turnaround. This made the situation far more serious. Gavin had never dreamed that the events in Rainbow Town would attract the attention of the city leadership so quickly. All he could do was beat his chest and promise to fix everything. But to fix a problem, you first have to find its source. Faced with Gavin's furious demand for an answer, everyone, from Secretary Zhang to the retiring old mayor to Eleanor herself, was silent. Even now, they had no idea why the business owners were leaving. But Caleb knew. After leaving the police station, he had heard about the mass withdrawal of the dozen or so companies. He immediately guessed it was his uncle, Sebastian, pulling the strings from behind the scenes, getting revenge on his behalf for Eleanor's betrayal. The feeling, he had to admit, was satisfying. He could picture the confusion and panic in the town hall without even being there. But he couldn't bring himself to gloat. The withdrawal of these companies meant that at least 1,000 town residents would suddenly be unemployed. It would be a devastating blow to the town's entire economy. The thought that his uncle would cause such widespread collateral damage just to get back at Eleanor for him filled Caleb with guilt. He had to call his uncle immediately and have him find a plausible reason for the companies to halt their withdrawal. Caleb hitched a ride on a tractor hauling bricks back to the AG Tech station. His old colleagues were surprised to see he'd been released, but no one came over to talk to him. They all knew that even if he was out, he had offended the magistrate's son, and his future was bleak. It was best to keep their distance. Caleb ignored them and hurried into his office. Because he was married to the deputy mayor, he had been given a private office with its own phone line. He closed the door, picked up the receiver, and dialed. Caleb, it wasn't my idea to pull the investments, Sebastian said with a sigh after Caleb explained. It was your grandfather. What? Caleb was stunned. Doesn't he know this will have a devastating impact on Rainbow Town's economy? Once word of this gets out, what other company will ever want to invest here? Of course he knows, Sebastian replied. That's precisely why he called me personally and ordered me to do it. Not only that, he forbade me from making any investments in Yunhu County for the next 2 years. If Caleb's marriage to the Shaw family was a political alliance, his parents' marriage had been a union of government and commerce. The Su family had no one in politics, but they commanded a vast business empire overseas. This structure was designed to avoid the appearance of collusion. Sebastian was the Su family's representative in the country, and he was the one who doted on Caleb the most. But the Su family had a long-standing policy. Their domestic development would unconditionally follow the arrangements of the Chui family. So, when the old man himself called, Sebastian had to obey. Grandfather forbade any investment for 2 years? Caleb was confused. Why? Because you are going to be the mayor of Rainbow Town, Sebastian explained. He is giving you 2 years, at most, to test your abilities. If you are capable, you will revive the town, and the Chui family will give you their full support. If you can't, the Su family will step in after 2 years and invest heavily to make up for the economic damage your incompetence caused the people. But the Chui family will never again support your political career. This is all a mess you created 2 years ago. Caleb finally understood. He laughed. To give a reborn person 2 full years to turn around a town's economy. His grandfather was truly throwing down the gauntlet. Oh, right, Sebastian added, as if remembering something. There's one more thing, the most important thing. What is it? Caleb asked. Sebastian's voice was slow and deliberate. This morning, the Shaw family, their still unmarried daughter. She accepted the reproposal of marriage that your grandfather made on your behalf. What? My grandfather found out I was just dumped by Eleanor, and he immediately ran to the Shaw family to propose on my behalf again? Good heavens. The old man has some nerve. Where did he get the audacity to ask for my hand again? Me, a second-hand good who rejected their daughter in the first place. And the most crucial part, the Shaw family actually agreed. Had their daughter really been unable to find anyone else to marry? Caleb was dumbfounded for a long moment before he managed to ask, Uncle, that's impossible, right? Why would it be impossible? Your grandfather called me himself, Sebastian chuckled. You must be wondering why he dared to go and ask again. Caleb nodded vigorously. It's because your grandfather discovered that in the 2 years you were married and living in Rainbow Town, many suitors went to the Shaw family, and all of them were rejected, Sebastian explained. So he started to wonder, could it be that the Shaw family's daughter, who was practically your childhood sweetheart, still had you in her heart? So the old man decided to give it a shot. And what do you know? The very same Miss Shaw, who wouldn't even budge for the persistent pursuit of the capital's powerful Qin family. She actually agreed. Childhood sweetheart. Hearing those words, Caleb's mind was filled with the phantom sound of a little girl's voice, calling him Big Brother. Decades ago, the patriarchs of the Chui and Shaw families had been comrades in arms, fighting side by side. After peace was established, the CYS went into politics, and the Shaws into the military. But for more than 10 years, the two families lived in the same large residential compound. Caleb and the Shaw daughter, born a year apart, had grown up playing together. She was always trailing behind him, calling him brother this and brother that. But when Caleb was 10, the Shaw family moved to the military district compound. He rarely saw her after that. Still, having spent 10 years together, it wasn't a stretch to call them childhood sweethearts. And because of that, whenever Caleb thought of her, he pictured a little yellow-haired girl with a runny nose, wiping it on her sleeve. Even as she grew into a beautiful young woman, he never developed romantic feelings for her. They were too familiar. It felt wrong to even think about it. He had always treated her like a little sister, which is why he had refused the family's wishes for them to marry. Chloe, she really was waiting for me, Caleb thought, a complex mix of emotions washing over him. Chloe Zhao? That was the name of the Shaw family's daughter. Is her name a play on words? A hint that she loved the wrong person since she was a child? As Caleb's mind wandered, Sebastian spoke again. Caleb, what are your plans for that Julian Zhao? Although Eleanor's clouded judgment was the main cause of the divorce, neither the Chui nor the Su family would ever let Julian Zhao off the hook for daring to steal from them. Caleb pushed the image of Chloe to the back of his mind. His tone turned cold. Let him die. Good. Sebastian agreed without hesitation. I'll arrange it, but I suggest you be the one to personally send him off. If he's going to die, he should know why. Fine. You handle the arrangements. Caleb spoke with his uncle for a few more minutes before hanging up. The Su family's withdrawal from Rainbow Town was a done deal. The town's economy would suffer a severe blow, another hard fact. Secretary Zhang's dream of leveraging the future group investment to join the county's standing committee was now shattered. And Gavin Zhao, the magistrate in charge of the county's economy, would also have to bear some responsibility. As for Eleanor Lou, who had divorced Caleb to climb the social ladder. Caleb couldn't help but let out a few cold laughs before pushing the thought of her away. He focused his attention on how he would revive the town's economy once he became mayor. He opened a drawer, took out a pen and paper, and began to plan. The sky gradually darkened. No one came to bother him. It wasn't until his stomach grumbled loudly that he realized it was already 8 o'clock at night. The economic development plan was easy to formulate. His mind was flooded with golden ideas for creating businesses to revitalize Rainbow Town, all based on his knowledge of its current state. Having lived 2 lives, Caleb was also well-versed in the various struggles of the political world. But there was one problem he couldn't solve. You can't make bricks without straw. To start any factory, he needed money. And Rainbow Town's financial situation was far from optimistic. The key is, even if I become mayor, I probably won't be able to command the finance department in the short term, Caleb thought, lighting a cigarette and frowning. Rainbow Town was a typical township, run by a 9-member committee. The town government, led by the mayor, consisted of 5 deputy mayors overseeing different sectors. The 2 most powerful were the deputy mayor for commerce and the deputy mayor for social security. The latter was usually held by the police chief, in this case, Chief Dylan, who controlled the guns. The former, Eleanor Lou, controlled the finance department and other key sectors, the purse strings. The 2 deputies who could help a mayor the most were his enemies, especially Eleanor. Without her full support, Caleb couldn't get a single cent out of the finance department. The most ironic part was that in the past, to help Eleanor secure her position as deputy mayor, Caleb had painstakingly taught her many of the political tactics he'd grown up observing. And now, he had shot himself in the foot, losing both the girl and the game. Sigh. And grandfather just had to forbid my uncle from helping me, Caleb lamented. Otherwise, I could rustle up a few million in minutes. I'd find a proxy and vigorously develop the private economy here. This era was precisely when the government was repeatedly emphasizing the development of the private sector. Many people with stable government jobs were bravely diving into the world of business. Anyone who started a business at this time could make money with their eyes closed, as long as they didn't self-destruct. It was no exaggeration to say that the country was paved with gold, waiting for those with the courage and vision to pick it up. The phone suddenly rang. Caleb, who was about to turn on his electric hot plate to cook some noodles, casually picked up the receiver. This is Caleb Chui at the AG Tech station. Who's calling? There was no reply from the other end. Caleb waited a moment, looked at the receiver, then put it back to his ear. Hello? Who is this? I'm going to hang up if you don't speak. Still silence. Weirdo, Caleb muttered to himself. Just as he was about to hang up, a cool, clear female voice came through the line. This is Chloe Zhao. Chloe Zhao? The Chloe who had loved the wrong person since childhood? Hearing the girl on the other end introduce herself, Caleb was momentarily stunned. Chloe didn't speak either. The 2 of them held the phones, a long silence stretching between them. Caleb cleared his throat, his face flushing with embarrassment, and was the first to break the silence. Hey, Piggy, are you okay? Chloe's tone remained cool. No, Caleb asked, why not? Chloe fell silent again. Caleb scratched the back of his head, unsure what to say. Finally, Chloe spoke softly. You told me countless times that you would marry me, but you married another woman. Caleb's brow twitched. He had told her many times that he would marry her, but that was just kids playing house. Once he started middle school, he'd forgotten all about those childhood promises. But Chloe, who had loved the wrong man for so long, had never forgotten. She had been waiting for him, and he had married Eleanor. When your grandfather came to propose for me, Chloe said after another long pause, my grandfather was giving me an ultimatum, demanding I accept the Qin family's proposal. I couldn't hold out any longer, mostly because I knew that what I was desperately holding on to was just a childish promise to you, something you never took seriously. Her voice was quiet. If you had divorced one day later, I would be someone else's wife now. Caleb pursed his lips and said in a low voice, Piggy, I don't deserve this from you. Chloe's reply was flat. Whether you deserve it or not is for me to decide. Caleb had nothing to say to that. Your grandfather suggested that I wait for you for 2 years, Chloe said, changing the subject. We'll get married then, because these next 2 years are very important for you. Okay, Caleb agreed without hesitation. Chloe suddenly asked, can you still remember what I look like? An image immediately surfaced in Caleb's mind. Chloe as he had seen her just before his wedding to Eleanor. Beautiful. The word was cliché, but no other word could describe her. A clean, delicate face, but with a fierce spirit, a tiny waist, and long legs. I can, Caleb said with a smile. I just have to visit any villager's house, and I can see what you look like. In the countryside at that time, almost every household raised pigs. A dial tone buzzed in his ear. Caleb stared at the phone, bewildered. He'd made one little joke about her nickname, and she had hung up on him without a second thought. Her temper was nothing like it was when they were children. He quickly redialed, but no one answered. The girl who had loved the wrong man for so long was genuinely angry. The night grew deeper. At midnight, Eleanor dragged her exhausted body out of the conference room and back to her empty home. After more than 10 hours of frantic effort, even after the county party secretary, Julian Zhao, had rushed to Rainbow Town, they still couldn't stop the determined withdrawal of the dozen or so business owners. The owners were willing to take the loss, and there was nothing Secretary Lou could do but follow the contracts. And the most crucial part was that even now, Eleanor and the others had no idea what the real reason for their departure was. After completing the paperwork, the business owners immediately began their withdrawal. Strangely, they were taking all of their production equipment and any raw materials that couldn't be produced locally. They were leaving nothing behind. As their departure began, 1,000 workers in Rainbow Town were suddenly unemployed. In those days, finding a job close to home was incredibly difficult. What's more, these companies had offered good wages and benefits. Now, their good jobs were gone. The 1,000 unemployed workers directed all their frustration and anger at the town's leadership. They didn't believe for a second that the owners would leave for no reason. It had to be something the town officials did, like demanding bribes and kickbacks. Another, more mysterious rumor began to circulate. The businesses are all leaving because the deputy mayor in charge of investment, Eleanor Lou, is a fickle, social climbing woman who abandoned her husband for wealth and status. It's karma. The county magistrate let his son destroy a family, and the business owners were disgusted by it, so they left. There were many theories, but hundreds, nearly 1,000, of unemployed residents surrounded the town hall, cursing the town leaders. If the county secretary hadn't personally intervened, the crowd might have stayed all night. Because of this incident, Secretary Lou had given the Rainbow Town leadership another tongue lashing. He also took the opportunity to express his displeasure with County Magistrate Julian Zhao. Gavin, who usually stood against Secretary Lou, could only hang his head in silence. Secretary Zhang and Eleanor were even more humiliated. With this level of competence, you want to join the county committee? You want to be mayor? Secretary Lou had said as he was getting into his car, his sharp gaze sweeping over Gavin and Eleanor. Go sort out your own family lives first. He looked at Gavin because he already knew that Gavin's son had pursued Eleanor, forcing her to divorce her husband. He mentioned Secretary Zhang because he knew Zhang was Gavin's man, the one who had supported Julian in his pursuit of Eleanor. As for Eleanor, who dreamed of becoming mayor, her chances were now zero. Gavin Zhao's face was ashen. Secretary Zhang's jaw muscles clenched and unclenched. Eleanor wished the ground would swallow her whole. After the higher-ups left, Secretary Zhang immediately convened another meeting. They had to discuss how to mitigate the terrible impact of the withdrawals and, crucially, how to attract new investment. Eleanor, who usually shone in these meetings, felt like she was in a daze all night. She just couldn't understand. Why did all the companies she had personally brought in over 2 years pull out the moment she and Caleb divorced? Could all these companies be connected to Caleb? Was it Caleb who was helping me behind the scenes all along? Did they all leave because he and I got divorced? Impossible. Caleb has a capital city residence permit, but he comes from an ordinary family. How could he possibly have that much power? The beautiful deputy mayor of Rainbow Town tossed and turned in her bed, muttering to herself. Finally, as the sky began to lighten, she drifted into a restless sleep. A few minutes later, in her sleep, Eleanor instinctively reached out to the other side of the bed, a soft, sleepy sound in her throat. Caleb, come and get some. I can't sleep unless you do. She embraced only empty air. Eleanor's body trembled. She slowly opened her eyes. Staring at the empty pillow beside her, tears of regret streamed down her face. The sun rose. Caleb was up at 6, walking for about half an hour to get breakfast in town. He had no choice. The AG Tech station was 2 kilometers north of Rainbow Town, situated on a lonely stretch of road with nothing around it. His dorm and office had electric hot plates and noodles, but while that was fine for one meal, a strong young man like Caleb couldn't survive on plain boiled noodles 3 times a day. He had woken up from hunger at 4 that morning and had to chug a large glass of water to tide him over. After a 30-minute walk, he arrived in town. For the past 2 years, he and Eleanor rarely made breakfast, preferring to eat out together every day. He had gotten used to going to Old Min's bun shop for a few buns and 2 bowls of rice porridge. Old Min recognized him as a regular. He knew Caleb was Deputy Mayor Lou's husband, and he also knew that Caleb had been kicked to the curb a couple of days ago. But unlike some others, Old Min didn't give him any strange looks. He greeted him as warmly as ever. Caleb, 6 chive buns and 2 bowls of porridge. No, 6 meat buns this morning, Caleb said with a grin, hooking a small stool with his foot and sitting down. I think I'm having a growth spurt. My appetite's huge, and veggie buns just don't cut it anymore. Huh, you're too old for a growth spurt. The only thing you're growing now is wrinkles. Old Min laughed, but he quickly brought Caleb his order. The sharp ringing of a bicycle bell sounded. Caleb turned to look. He saw several middle-aged men and women, each with a passenger, their faces etched with grief, pedaling furiously eastward down the road. Sigh, so pitiful, Old Min said. He clearly recognized one of them and knew their story. He sighed heavily and shook his head. Caleb was curious. Old Min, what's wrong? You know them? The man in front is the brother-in-law of Simple Min from our village. He was just here a few days ago, eating buns after helping Min with the wheat harvest. There weren't many customers yet, so Old Min sat down across from Caleb and lit a cigarette. Simple Min had been called that since childhood because he was a bit slow. An orphan with no siblings, he had grown up on the charity of the village. For a man like that to find a wife in the countryside would take a miracle. But a miracle had happened. When Simple Min was 31, on his way back from the market, he found someone drowning in the river. He saved her, a beautiful 18-year-old girl. Just like in a novel, the girl, to repay his kindness, married him despite her family's strong opposition. A year later, she gave birth to a daughter. 6 years ago, they had a second daughter. Their eldest daughter was not only as beautiful as her mother, but she was also a brilliant student and had gotten into the county's top high school. That girl has a real shot at college. Min and his wife were over the moon. To earn her tuition, when work was scarce for Min, his wife went to the county seat to work as a housekeeper for a family, Old Min explained. Everything was going well. But last night, the son of that family came home drunk. He saw that Min's wife, despite her age, was still very beautiful, and he acted like an animal. But she was a strong-willed woman. After what happened, she called the village and told them what she had endured, and then she threw herself into the river. When Min got the news, he raced to the county seat on his bicycle, but he got into an accident on the way. Just like that, both of them are gone. Listening to Old Min's sorrowful account, Caleb's heart grew heavy. He only knew what he'd been told, so all he could do was sigh with him. Mayor Lou, you're here? Old Min suddenly stood up from his stool to greet a new customer. After he spoke, he seemed to realize something was off. He instinctively glanced at Caleb. Caleb, too, turned his head. He saw Eleanor standing not far away, dressed in a white floral dress and black sandals. Her figure was as striking as ever, but her face was haggard. She was staring at him, frozen. Their eyes met. After a single second, Caleb turned back to his food and continued eating. He was used to eating at Old Min's, and so was she. Her arrival didn't affect his appetite in the slightest. From the moment he received the divorce certificate, he had considered her a stranger. Besides, after his phone call with Chloe last night, he was now a spoken-for man. He had no interest in any other woman. Whether Eleanor was haggard or radiant, it had nothing to do with him. Eleanor silently walked to a small table nearby and ordered 2 plain buns and a bowl of porridge. Caleb ate a bun, then a clove of garlic, then a spoonful of porridge. His appetite was excellent. When he was full, it was time to pay and leave. He still needed to buy some mosquito coils and a new net. The AG Tech station was a godforsaken place, devoid of female company, but swarming with mosquitoes. Old Min, how much? Caleb called out from habit. He reached into his pocket for his phone, ready to scan a payment code. But of course, there were no smartphones in this era. And more importantly, where was his money? Having gotten used to never carrying cash in his previous life, Caleb had forgotten to bring any this morning. In fact, when he and Eleanor used to eat out, she was always the one who paid. This was awkward. He could only give Old Min a sheepish grin. Hey, sorry about this, I forgot my wallet. Can you put it on my tab? I'll bring you the money tomorrow morning. I promise I won't forget. Hey, don't worry about it. Even if you did forget, it's just a few buns, Old Min said, waving his hand dismissively as he started clearing the table. Thanks. Ugh. Caleb let out a satisfied burp and stood up to thank Old Min again. Just then, he heard Eleanor's voice from the next table. Old Min, I'll get his. Caleb immediately frowned and turned his head. He saw Eleanor taking a 5 yuan note from her wallet and holding it out to Old Min. Old Min hesitated, looking at Caleb. His eyes seemed to ask, "Your ex-wife wants to pay for you. Do I take it or not?" "Might as well take it," Caleb said with a small laugh. He turned to Eleanor and said casually, "Thanks for the buns, Mayor Lou." Eleanor's face suddenly flushed a deep red, and her eyes lit up. "Thanks for the buns, Mayor Lou." It was the intimate phrase he always used to say to her, and only to her, after they had been together. It was only when he saw the blush creep up Eleanor's cheeks that Caleb realized what he had done. In the past, seeing her like this would have made his heart skip a beat. But now, Caleb felt nothing of the sort. Instead, a knot of revulsion tightened in Caleb's stomach. This was the woman who had thrown away their marriage for so-called ambition, ready to offer that unique, private allure, which should have belonged only to Caleb, to another man. Caleb spat on the ground in disgust and walked away without another word. The blush on Eleanor's face drained away, leaving her deathly pale. Eleanor knew exactly why Caleb had spat, but what could Eleanor do? At noon, the emergency meeting that had started at 8 in the morning finally concluded. Everyone present had racked their brains, trying to figure out how to salvage the investments, or at the very least, why the companies were leaving. But by the end of the meeting, no one had a single viable solution. Eleanor, who had been haunted by the sound of Caleb spitting all morning, trudged wearily back to her office. Eleanor opened the door and saw Julian Zhao. Julian was sitting behind Eleanor's desk, Julian's feet propped up on the corner, casually poking at a photo frame with a pen. Seeing Julian, Eleanor, who had been in a daze all day, froze for a second. Then Eleanor lunged forward and snatched the frame from Julian's hands. It was a photo of Eleanor and Caleb. Julian had used a red pen to completely scribble over Caleb's face, adding a large, bloody knife at Caleb's neck. "Julian." Eleanor's body trembled. Eleanor rounded on Julian like an enraged leopardess, her voice a low snarl. "Who told you to destroy his picture? Who let you into my office? Get out. Get out right now." "Whoa." Julian was taken aback by Eleanor's ferocity, quickly putting Julian's feet down. "What? You're upset that I colored over his picture? Eleanor, let me tell you, you two are divorced. I, Julian Zhao, am your future husband. I don't want to see a photo of him and you on your desk. What's wrong with that?" Eleanor stared, momentarily stunned. Julian smiled. "That's right, you're right," Eleanor said, Eleanor's eyes blinking as Eleanor stared hard at Julian. Eleanor was a fool to divorce Caleb, but Eleanor hasn't married Julian yet. Julian has no right to destroy Eleanor's things. And Julian certainly has no right to tell Eleanor that Eleanor can't keep a photo of Eleanor and Caleb on Eleanor's desk. If Eleanor doesn't marry Julian, who is Eleanor going to marry? Julian asked, Julian's voice thick with anger and humiliation. The whole town knows Eleanor divorced Caleb to marry Julian. A look of painful regret washed over Eleanor's face, but Eleanor didn't know what to say. Julian was right. Eleanor's mother and brother had made sure the whole world knew Eleanor was leaving Caleb for Julian. Eleanor regretted it. Eleanor truly regretted divorcing Caleb. The raw pain in Eleanor's eyes provoked Julian. Julian wanted to throw Eleanor onto the desk and take Eleanor, just like Julian had taken the housekeeper last night, fueled by alcohol. But Julian knew Eleanor wasn't like that poor woman, who had foolishly killed herself after being violated. And this wasn't Julian's home, it was the deputy mayor's office. Julian fought back the urge to lash out. "It seems Eleanor still can't forget Caleb," Julian said. Eleanor nodded instinctively. Eleanor's reaction sent a jolt of jealousy through Julian. Julian sneered. "So, Eleanor still want to sleep with Caleb?" "Yes, Julian's right." Eleanor's brow twitched, but Eleanor nodded firmly. "Right now, that's all Eleanor want to do." "You slut." Julian raised Julian's hand to slap Eleanor. Eleanor didn't flinch. Eleanor tilted Eleanor's chin up, defiant. Julian's hand stopped in midair. Julian could see a wild, crazed fire suddenly ignite in Eleanor's eyes. Julian had a sharp premonition that if Julian hit Eleanor, Eleanor would blow this whole thing wide open. Eleanor's emotional state was incredibly unstable. Eleanor, just wait," Julian said, pointing a finger at Eleanor before storming out. Julian went to find Secretary Zhang. Julian was furious that Eleanor couldn't forget Caleb. Julian and Secretary Zhang needed to come up with a plan to deal with Caleb. "Caleb, Eleanor's so sorry. Eleanor's so sorry." Eleanor ignored Julian's threat, clutching the photo frame to Eleanor's chest. Eleanor sank into Eleanor's chair. And as tears streamed down Eleanor's face, Eleanor began to rub at the red ink on the photo with Eleanor's thumb. Gradually, washed clean by Eleanor's tears of regret, Caleb's face reappeared. Caleb was smiling, his right hand on Eleanor's shoulder. Eleanor had Eleanor's arms wrapped around his waist, Eleanor's head resting against him, Eleanor's face overflowing with a happiness that seemed to spill out of the frame. Looking at Caleb's bright, sunny smile, Eleanor pressed Eleanor's cheek against the glass, just as Eleanor used to press Eleanor's face against Caleb's chest every night after they were married. Eleanor's heart felt impossibly calm, and soon, Eleanor fell into a deep sleep. The shrill ring of the telephone woke Eleanor. Eleanor had been dreaming, a blissful smile on Eleanor's face, listening to Caleb thank Eleanor for buying him buns. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Eleanor had slept for nearly 3.5 hours. The deep, quality sleep left Eleanor feeling refreshed, Eleanor's body humming with renewed energy. The dream, Eleanor realized, must have had some magical effect. Eleanor quickly wiped the corner of Eleanor's mouth and answered the phone. It was Director Yan from the government office. Mayor Lou, some villagers are blocking the main gate. Should Mayor Lou come take a look? Villagers gathering to protest was not an unheard of event, but Eleanor was still surprised. The petitions office, which handled such matters, wasn't under Eleanor's jurisdiction. Why was Director Yan calling Eleanor? Mayor Lou, it's like this, Yan said in a low voice. The group is from Min Village. This matter, it might be related to Julian Zhao. Related to Julian? Eleanor was taken aback. What does something related to Julian have to do with Eleanor? Yan cleared his throat on the other end. Well, Mayor Lou, they're all saying Julian is Mayor Lou's fiancé. They're all saying Julian is Mayor Lou's fiancé. The word struck Eleanor's heart like a physical blow. Eleanor quickly changed the subject. Why are the villagers from Min Village protesting? They say that last night, Julian assaulted his family's housekeeper. And after, she drowned herself in the river, Yan explained quickly. Before she died, she called her husband and her daughter at school and told them why she was going to kill herself. Her husband, who is also from Min Village, was killed in a traffic accident last night while rushing to the county seat. Now their 2 daughters went to the county to seek justice, but got nowhere. Someone told them that Eleanor is Julian's fiancé and that Julian's hiding at Eleanor's house. So they came here looking for Eleanor. A human life. 2 human lives. And the woman had been assaulted by Julian before she died. And Julian was supposedly at Eleanor's house. The key points exploded in Eleanor's mind like a string of thunderclaps. Eleanor slammed the phone down and bolted out of Eleanor's office. A large crowd had gathered at the town government's main gate. People were whispering amongst themselves, looking at 2 girls dressed in funeral clothes, kneeling silently at the entrance. One looked to be 17 or 18, the other no more than 5 or 6. They were sisters. The younger one knelt, sobbing uncontrollably. The older sister's eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. She held a piece of white cloth high above her head. On it was a line of dark red characters. Deputy Mayor Lou, hand over our mother's murderer. It was written in blood. The girl had bitten her own finger to write it. Old Lee from the petitions office was anxiously craning his neck, looking into the compound. This protest was different. The incident had happened in Yunhu County, not Rainbow Town, and supposedly at the magistrate's own house. Technically, it had nothing to do with their town. But someone had told these poor girls that the man who had assaulted their mother was not only Deputy Mayor Eleanor Lou's fiancé, but was currently hiding at Eleanor's home. So, the girls had brought villagers with them to demand justice. Vera Wong had barred the door, refusing to let them in and claiming Julian wasn't there. But a neighbor told the villagers that Julian had come over to drink with Gary that afternoon and that they had been shouting drunkenly in the yard. The villagers didn't dare break down the door, so someone had the idea to come to the government building and find Eleanor directly. This is just one disaster after another. Old Lee from the petitions office thought. Old Lee's head aching for Eleanor, who was already overwhelmed by the investment crisis. It's Eleanor Lou's husband, someone in the crowd suddenly shouted. With a rustle, the entire crowd, including the 2 kneeling girls, looked up. From the west, down the main street, Caleb came riding on his bicycle. The handlebars and rear rack were loaded with a new mosquito net, coils, beer, and peanuts Caleb had just bought. Caleb saw the crowd from a distance, and, out of pure instinct, Caleb pedaled faster. Caleb had just reached the edge of the crowd when Caleb heard the shout. Caleb's heart sank with annoyance. The town officials mostly knew Caleb and Eleanor were divorced, but the majority of the townspeople wouldn't care about such details. To them, Caleb was still Eleanor's husband. It was normal. What wasn't normal was what happened next. As Caleb stopped his bike and put his foot down, a girl in funeral clothes shot out from the crowd. "You monster, give me back my mother." Before Caleb could even see Mina's face clearly, Mina threw herself at Caleb, screaming hysterically. With a crash, Caleb and his bicycle were knocked to the ground. "Hey, what is this?" Caleb's head hit the pavement hard. Caleb's vision went black, and a sharp pain shot through Caleb's neck. The girl, who had fallen with Caleb, clawed at Caleb's face. Because Caleb's head was turned, Mina missed, but then, with incredible ferocity, Mina opened Mina's mouth and bit down hard on Caleb's neck. Like a small dog with its prey, Mina shook her head violently, trying to tear a piece of flesh from Caleb. The pain was excruciating. Completely stunned, Caleb grabbed the girl's hair. "Let go! Let go!" Caleb yelled. The girl only bit down harder. Just as the agony threatened to make Caleb lash out, someone rushed over, grabbed the girl's arm, and shouted, "Mina! Mina's got the wrong person. Caleb's not Julian Zhao. Caleb's just Deputy Mayor Lou's ex-husband. Eleanor's ex-husband, not Eleanor's fiancé. Damn it. Who was the idiot who just yelled that Caleb was Eleanor's husband?" The person who stopped Mina from Mina's frenzied attack was Old Min, the owner of the bun shop. At Old Min's words, the pressure on Caleb's neck immediately eased. Though Mina's eyes were wild with grief, Mina hadn't completely lost Mina's mind. Mina heard Old Min, and, in an instant, Mina understood the difference. A few other women rushed in and pulled Mina away. Old Min quickly helped Caleb to his feet. Caleb clutched Caleb's neck and looked at Caleb's hand. It was covered in blood. Who had Caleb wronged to deserve this? Attacked and nearly killed for no reason at all. Spurred by the pain and the sight of Caleb's own blood, a wave of fury washed over Caleb. Caleb pushed Old Min aside and strode toward Mina. Caleb grabbed Mina's hair again, pulling Mina close as Caleb raised Caleb's fist to strike. But then Caleb saw Mina's eyes, red with a mixture of sorrow and hatred, and Caleb couldn't bring Caleb himself to do it. Old Min took the opportunity to separate Caleb and Mina again. Mina has the wrong man. Old Min yelled at Mina. Caleb's name is Caleb Chui, not Julian Zhao. Caleb's the deputy mayor's ex-husband, not Eleanor's fiancé. Now, apologize to Caleb. Just then, Eleanor, having gotten the call from Yin, hurried out of the town hall. Eleanor saw Caleb's neck covered in blood, and Eleanor heard every word of Old Min's shouting. Why was Caleb's neck bleeding? Who had hurt him? The sight of his injury sent a shock through Eleanor. Her pupils contracted, and her heart was instantly flooded with a pang of pain, followed by a surge of anger. But just as she was about to rush over to check his wound and find out who had dared to hurt him, she heard Old Min's words. His shout was like an invisible club, striking her hard on the head. It made her realize a stark, brutal fact. She was now just Caleb's ex-wife. She had long ago lost the right to do anything for him as his wife when he was hurt. And when she heard Old Min say the word fiancé, the image of Julian Zhao flashed before her eyes, and a sharp pain shot through her heart. It hurt so much she couldn't breathe. She quickly pressed a hand to her chest. She could hear her own soul wailing in agony. Eleanor, you damned fool. How could you have been so stupid as to leave Caleb for that man? Before her silent scream faded, someone in the crowd shouted, Eleanor Lou is here. At the sound of her name, the crowd that had been gawking at Caleb and Mina all turned to look at the gate. Mina, her mouth stained with blood, also snapped her head around. When she saw Eleanor, she forgot everything that had just happened. Only one thought remained in her mind. Make this woman hand over the man who had driven her mother to her death. Mina walked towards Eleanor, step by step, her red eyes locked on hers. Eleanor felt as if she were being stalked by a ferocious leopardess. She instinctively took a step back in alarm. Old Lee from the petitions office had seen Mina's earlier attack on Caleb. Fearing she would do the same to Eleanor, he quickly spread his arms to block her path, shouting, calm down, acting like this won't solve anything. But right in front of everyone, Mina reached Eleanor and dropped to her knees. She picked up the white cloth from the ground and held it high above her head for Eleanor to see. Being grabbed by Caleb had shocked Mina back to a state of partial clarity. She realized she had attacked the wrong person and that she had to control her emotions. She couldn't use such irrational behavior on anyone but Julian Zhao. Jia, come here, Mina called to her little sister, her voice hoarse, her eyes still fixed on Eleanor. The younger girl, Jia Min, had been terrified when she saw her sister attack Caleb. She had been too scared to even cry. But now, she followed her sister's command on pure instinct. She walked over to her sister's side. Jia, kneel before the deputy mayor, Mina said. We will beg her together to hand over the man who killed our mother. 6-year-old Jia immediately knelt beside her sister, in front of Eleanor. Eleanor snapped out of her daze. She bent down, reaching out to help the sisters up. But Mina's voice rose in a piercing cry. Deputy Mayor Lou, I beg you, hand over the man who drove my mother to her death. At that, Jia could no longer hold back her tears and began to wail. Eleanor, still bent over, froze. Sigh, those poor children. They lost both parents in one night. Simple Min was an honest man his whole life. He never did a bad thing, always helped his neighbors. How did he end up like this? It's all that bastard Zhao's fault. He destroyed that family. Hand over Zhao. You woman, hand over that bastard fiancé of yours. We're going to kill him. The crowd, witnessing the scene, began to murmur, and their anger grew, their emotions spiraling out of control. They began to press in on Eleanor. Everyone, calm down. Calm down, Old Lee yelled, trying to shield Eleanor with his arms. Impulsiveness won't solve anything. He urged Eleanor to get back inside the compound. But Eleanor stood as if she were frozen, biting her lip, unmoving. Everyone please. The one who killed her mother was Julian Zhao, not Deputy Mayor Lou. Old Min, the most rational one there, shouted as he rushed over. Meanwhile, Caleb finally understood what was happening. He remembered the story Old Min had told him at breakfast. He realized the girl who had nearly bitten him to death was Simple Min's eldest daughter. And the official son from the story was Julian Zhao. Julian had stolen his wife, and now, because of him, Mina had mistaken Caleb for him and nearly killed him. What kind of messed up situation was this? He clutched his still bleeding neck, a feeling of utter disgust washing over him. His hatred for that vile pair, Eleanor and Julian, solidified into something bone deep. Julian's death won't be an easy one, Caleb vowed to himself. He took off his white shirt and wrapped it around his neck. He needed to get to the clinic and have the wound treated. It was bleeding too much. He'd probably need a rabies shot. Using his shirt as a temporary bandage, the now bare-chested Caleb bent down to pick up his bicycle. "Sister, where's Mommy?" Zhao sobbed, clinging to her sister. "Mommy's dead," Mina cried, her forced composure finally shattering. She was assaulted by this woman's fiancé, and then she drowned herself. The sisters' exchange was like a lit match tossed onto gasoline-soaked cotton. The crowd's anger erupted into a roaring flame. "Kill this woman. Avenge Simple Min's wife," someone roared, and the villagers surged towards Eleanor. "Everyone, calm down." Old Lee managed one last despairing cry before he was swallowed by the angry mob. A second later, Eleanor, who had been shielded behind him, was pushed to the ground. As the tide of angry people was about to engulf her, she became lucid. She felt no fear. Instead, a strange, powerful longing filled her. She wanted to be beaten to death by the angry villagers. She heard her own soul telling her, "Eleanor, this is the end you deserve." It all started when you abandoned Caleb to climb the ladder. As a large foot swung towards her, Eleanor closed her eyes, smiled, and whispered, "Caleb, I'm sorry." Suddenly, a familiar voice, a voice she knew better than her own, roared from above her. "All of you back the hell off. Back off. This is bad." Seeing the tide of angry villagers swallow Old Lee and surge towards Eleanor, Caleb, who was still bent over his bicycle, cried out in alarm. He truly didn't care much about whether Eleanor lived or died, but he was forced to see the bigger picture. If Eleanor was seriously injured or killed, the villagers who were trying to seek justice for the Min sisters would surely face consequences. It didn't matter that it was a mob. If a town's deputy mayor was beaten to death by villagers, the county, and even the city, would launch a severe investigation. The people here would pay a price they shouldn't have to pay, whether it was prison time or heavy fines their families couldn't afford. Most importantly, Caleb could guess with absolute certainty that Julian's father would use this incident to shift the focus away from his son's crime, turning the villagers into the villains and Julian into a forgotten footnote. "I can't let these villagers make that mistake," he thought. Forgetting everything else, Caleb lifted his bicycle and charged into the fray. He didn't look like a fighter, with his scholarly appearance and slender build. He didn't know any boxing or martial arts. But 2 years of repairing heavy farm machinery at the AG Tech station had given him a surprising amount of raw strength. He hefted the heavy bicycle with ease. Using it like a battering ram, he roared, "All of you, back the hell off. Back off." He swung the bike in a wide arc, sweeping it through the dozen or so villagers crowded around Eleanor and knocking them back. As they stumbled, he swung the bike again. "Back off. I said back off." The villagers retreated instinctively. With a loud crash, Caleb lifted the bicycle high and slammed it onto the ground. The beer bottles on the back rack broke free from their plastic bag and shattered on the pavement. The popping sounds of the exploding bottles cut through the noise of the crowd, stunning the angry villagers into a momentary silence. "Are you all possessed?" Caleb yelled at them. He used the moment to bend down and pull Eleanor up from the ground. She immediately tried to hide in his arms, but he coldly pushed her away. He was here to prevent a death, not to protect her like he used to. Eleanor froze, stunned. Caleb didn't even glance at her. He pointed a finger at the villagers and shouted, "No matter who is responsible for what happened, acting like this won't solve anything. If you hurt or kill her, you will go to jail. At the very least, you'll be fined. Isn't that right? Besides, this woman is not the murderer." The scene fell silent. Everyone stared blankly at Caleb, their boiling blood beginning to cool, their reason slowly returning. Eleanor looked at Caleb, her terrified eyes filling with regret. She wanted nothing more than to hide in his arms like she used to feel safe even if the world was ending. But it was too late. "Think about it," Caleb said, his voice becoming even sterner as he saw the villagers calming down. "Who was the one who assaulted her mother and drove her to her death? Instead of going through legal channels, you attack someone else. That's against the law. If you cause a serious incident, you will go to jail. And if you go to jail, what will happen to your wives and children? How worried will your parents be?" A look of fear crept onto the villagers' faces. Caleb's words were a harsh wake-up call. It was right to seek justice for the Min sisters, but they had to do it the right way. Otherwise, they could end up paying a terrible price themselves. And if something happened to them, what would their families do? "And you?" Caleb turned to Mina, who was still kneeling nearby. He didn't hold back. "You idiot. In your quest for justice, are you willing to disregard the lives of the people who are trying to help you? If she had been hurt or killed today, not only would they go to jail, but you would too. Because you're the one who incited them. If you go to jail, who will take care of your little sister? What will the families of the villagers who went to jail for you think of you? What would your parents think, watching from above?" Mina was stunned into silence by his tirade. "Get up," Caleb yelled, clutching the wound on his neck. "If you ever do something so stupid again, I'll beat you myself." Mina snapped out of it. I already went to the county, but no one would listen to us, she screamed, her voice raw with grief. You all forced me to do this. Should my mother just be assaulted and driven to her death by that animal Julian Zhao for nothing? I will give you an answer for this, Caleb replied without thinking. It would be simple enough for him. Once his uncle's people found an opportunity to deal with Julian, he could arrange for Mina to witness his end. As for using the legal system to go after Julian, he hadn't even considered it. Fine, Mina nodded forcefully. She pulled her little sister up from the ground, her eyes still fixed on Caleb. I'll remember your face. You said you'd give me an answer. Was she threatening him? Heh. A young girl who hadn't even fully matured was hardly qualified to threaten him. Caleb scoffed. Just then, a loud voice boomed from the edge of the crowd. What's going on here? Disperse. Everyone disperse. It was Carl Chun, the deputy police chief, running over with several members of the local defense team. Just like in the movies, the police arrived only after the fight was over. It wasn't really their fault. When the incident began, Carl was handling a brawl in another village. And Chief Dylan, upon hearing that villagers were surrounding Julian's hideout, had rushed over there, taking a different road and completely missing them. By the time Carl got the news and rushed to the town hall, Caleb had already handled the situation. Seeing Carl and his men arrive, Caleb finally relaxed. Eleanor, her nerves still shot, saw Mina glaring at her and instinctively moved closer to Caleb, grabbing his arm. Who is this? Eleanor? Get the hell away from me. Caleb glanced back, and with a forceful shove, pushed her away. Who was responsible for the death of Mina's mother? Eleanor's fiancé, Julian Zhao. And why had Mina nearly bitten Caleb to death? Because some idiot had shouted, "It's Eleanor Lou's husband." This woman, who should be accompanying her fiancé to hell, was trying to hide behind her ex-husband for protection. How dare she? A surge of rage and contempt washed over Caleb. He shoved her away forcefully. Eleanor stumbled back 3 full meters before catching her balance. In that moment, she felt her world shatter all over again. Her eyes filled with an agonizing sorrow. Just as she was about to look at Caleb, she heard the sound of many footsteps from the government compound. The town's party secretary, Zhang, emerged at the head of a dozen or so officials, their faces grim and determined. They had been hiding at a safe distance before, not wanting to get caught in the melee. Now that the situation was under control, the calculating Secretary Zhang made his grand entrance. What is all this? He roared with an air of authority. Have you all forgotten the law? Do you want to go to prison? The now calm villagers from Min village instinctively backed away. Everyone expected Mina to take this opportunity to beg Secretary Zhang for help. Instead, she turned to her uncle and the other villagers, her voice hoarse, and told them to go back to the village. Her parents' bodies were still at home. In this heat, it was important to lay them to rest as soon as possible. Her uncle and old Min agreed. As Mina lifted her little sister onto the back of a tractor, she turned and gave Caleb one last, long look. He happened to be looking her way. Her gaze was a clear message. Your name is Caleb Chui. I'll remember your face. You said you'd give me an answer. Caleb was unfazed by the young girl's threat. If he wasn't feeling sorry for her, he would have settled the score for nearly being bitten to death. His neck was really starting to throb. He needed to get to the clinic, and he absolutely couldn't forget the rabies shot. Ignoring the imposing Secretary Zhang and the silent, desolate figure of Eleanor, Caleb bent down and picked up his bicycle. The old, heavy-duty bike was built to last. Despite being used as a weapon and slammed on the ground, only a pedal was bent. Everything else was fine. He quickly got on and pedaled furiously towards the town clinic. Along the way, many people stared at the shirtless man with a bloody shirt wrapped around his neck, riding brazenly through the streets. The villagers from Min village had left. The front of the town hall was peaceful again. Secretary Zhang, having effortlessly resolved a mass protest, returned to his office and immediately called Julian, who was still hiding at Eleanor's house. He briefly explained what had happened and strongly advised him to wait until late at night before sneaking away. Who could guarantee that some of the villagers weren't hiding in the shadows, waiting to ambush him? All right, I get it. Damn peasants. Julian muttered into the phone in Eleanor's living room before hanging up. His face was a storm of conflicting emotions. After a moment, he picked up the phone again, dialed a number, and whispered, Zhao Long? It's Julian. Get some guys together and come to Rainbow Town tonight. That little bitch. I'm going to make sure she doesn't rest in peace. In the yard, Eleanor's father, old Lou, watched the living room door with disgust. He had strongly opposed the idea when his wife and son had pushed Eleanor to divorce Caleb and marry Julian. Old Lou had always admired Caleb, even finding him more agreeable than his own son, Gary. Gary was just like his mother, Vera, short-sighted and materialistic. But old Lou had very little say in his own home. It was his own fault. Years ago, despite being a married man, he had a drunken affair with Vera Wong. She became pregnant with Eleanor and used the child to force him to divorce his first wife and marry her. In that era, such a scandal was a fatal blow to a man's reputation. He had no choice but to abandon his wife and eldest daughter. It was the great pain of his life, and the main reason he had no standing in his own family. I have to find a way to stop Eleanor from marrying that man, old Lou thought, gazing at the setting sun, motionless for a long time. Caleb is the only son-in-law I approve of. Back at the town hall, Secretary Zhang was holding another meeting. This one wasn't about the withdrawn investments, but specifically about the Min Village incident. After his call with Julian, he had received a call from Magistrate Zhao, who had subtly instructed him to handle Simple Min's family and ensure they didn't cause any more trouble at the county level. The attendees included the retiring old mayor, Deputy Secretary Lou, Chief Dylan, and Old Lee from the petitions office, among others. Deputy Mayor Eleanor Lou was also present. After all, she was the well-known fiancée of the man at the center of the incident. Old Lee looked miserable. He was still shaken by the afternoon's events. If Caleb hadn't shown up, he might have been seriously hurt. The petitions office in Rainbow Town was a one-man operation. It was a thankless job that nobody with any connections wanted. Comrade Lee is overworked and understaffed, Secretary Zhang said, lighting a cigarette. He glanced at Eleanor, who had been silent since the meeting began. Therefore, I propose that we temporarily transfer Comrade Caleb Chui from the AG Tech Station to the petitions office to assist him. Old Lee was a low-ranking clerk. Caleb, on the other hand, was a section-level civil servant with a higher administrative rank. To transfer Caleb to assist a lower-ranking clerk was a blatant and insulting demotion. Secretary Zhang had to get his revenge on behalf of Julian for the two beatings. The old mayor and the other officials said nothing. They had their own problems and kept their heads down. Chief Dylan, however, immediately voiced his support. I think that's a good idea. Eleanor, who had been silent the entire meeting, finally looked up. She stared directly at Secretary Zhang, her words clear and firm. I disagree.